I will never forget the sound of that car door slamming shut. That dry, metallic click echoed like a gunshot, marking the absolute end of something that had been slowly suffocating in silence for years. Richard looked at me one last time through the windshield, wearing that expression of pure annoyance that had become his default setting, and said, "Get out, Claire. If you're going to keep crying, do it out here." And then he just drove away. The roar of the engine faded into the traffic, leaving me stranded at that bus stop, standing under a drizzle that felt like it was mocking me. I stood there, completely hollowed out. No money, no phone, nowhere to go. People rushed past me on the sidewalk without even glancing my way, as if my tragedy was just part of the city architecture, like a cracked pavement or a broken streetlight. My mascara was running down my cheeks, my blouse was soaked through to my skin, and my eyes were swollen shut. It was ridiculous, honestly. Here I was, a 68-year-old woman, sobbing on a street corner because the man I had shared half my life with had dumped me like I was a stranger he'd just met. For years, I had endured his shouting matches, his weaponized silence, and his unique talent for making me feel invisible. And yet, even in that humiliating moment, a pathetic part of me was still hoping he would turn the car around, that he would regret it, that he would come back for me. But he didn't. Not that time. Not ever. You know that feeling when the ground beneath you disappears? It's funny how the mind tries to bargain with reality. I kept thinking, this is just a fight. We'll fix this over dinner. But deep down, in the pit of my stomach, I knew the truth. I wasn't waiting for a ride. I was waiting for my life to make sense again. And that's a dangerous thing to wait for on a rainy corner. But before we go any further, I have a special invitation for you. Please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It really helps me see that you support me and enjoy these stories. Also, drop a comment down below and tell me which city you're watching from. Now, let's continue. The sky turned dark fast. I tried to huddle under the corroded roof of the bus shelter, staring blankly at the oil-slicked puddles forming around my feet. I thought about walking, but I didn't have the strength. The damp cold was seeping into my bones, and my heart was hammering against my ribs like a bird trying to escape a cage. Suddenly, I heard a voice, sweet, serene, almost melodic. "It's all right, child." I turned my head. An elderly blind woman was leaning on a cane, wearing a beige trench coat and a wool hat that looked like it belonged in a classic movie. Her hair was snow-white and perfectly pinned up, and her lips were painted a soft red that stood out against her pale skin. She was holding a small clutch, and standing right next to her was a tall man in a dark suit who looked like her chauffeur. I stammered, unable to even look her in the face. "I'm fine, ma'am." "No, you are not," she said with a tranquil smile. "I have lived long enough to recognize the sound of abandonment." Her words hit me with a tenderness I wasn't prepared for. The chauffeur looked at the old woman with deference. "Mrs. Sterling, we should get going. The rain is picking up." She raised a hand, silencing him gently. "Just a moment, Walter," she said calmly, then turned her face toward me. "Child, I need you to do me a favor. Pretend to be my granddaughter. My driver is about to pull the car around. I do not want that man who left you to have the final victory over you." "What?" I asked, completely dazed. "I don't understand." She smiled with absolute serenity. "You don't need to understand. Just pretend for a few minutes, and I promise you something. That man will regret leaving you here." I don't know why I believed her. Maybe it was her tone, or those sightless eyes filled with authority, or the way her cane tapped the ground with such certainty, as if the world obeyed her steps. At that moment, a sleek black town car pulled up in front of us. The chauffeur opened the rear door. "Mrs. Sterling, the car is ready." She took my arm gently. Her skin was warm, but her grip was surprisingly firm. "Let's go, granddaughter," she announced loudly. "You aren't staying here waiting for someone who doesn't deserve you." I got into the car without understanding a thing. The interior smelled of new leather and expensive perfume. Through the tinted window, I saw Richard's figure walking toward his car parked further up the block. He looked annoyed, impatient. But when he saw us, when he saw me climbing into that elegant vehicle with this distinguished woman, his expression shifted. For the first time in years, I saw him look confused, unsettled. The old woman turned her head toward where he was standing, and without needing to see him, murmured, "Sometimes life has a very curious way of balancing the books, my dear." The car pulled away. The windshield wipers beat a slow, steady rhythm. I didn't speak. I didn't know if I should say thank you or ask who on earth she was. I just stared at her, trying to comprehend how a blind stranger could radiate so much power. After a few minutes of silence, she spoke again. "Don't worry about your purse or your money. Tonight, you will sleep under a roof, and tomorrow, we will see if you're ready to start over." "Why are you helping me?" I asked in a whisper. "Because once, someone did the same for me," she replied. "And because when a woman has suffered enough, she can recognize the echo of that pain in another." The car turned onto a road that led into a wealthy historic district. The streetlights became scarce, the lawns wider, until I saw a wrought iron gate open slowly. Behind it, an old money mansion emerged from the rain, surrounded by century-old oak trees and a garden that looked like a dream frozen in time. "Welcome home, Claire," the old woman said, without me ever telling her my name. My heart skipped a beat. "How do you know my name?" I asked, barely breathing. She smiled, a gesture that was as gentle as it was unsettling. "Because destiny doesn't make mistakes when it puts two women on the same path." I sat there frozen. Logic told me to be afraid. I was in a stranger's car, going to a stranger's house. But my intuition, that quiet voice I had ignored for 40 years to keep the peace with Richard, was telling me something else. It was telling me that this wasn't a trap. It was a lifeboat. And for the first time in my life, I decided to trust the mystery instead of the known misery. The car stopped in front of a massive wooden door. Walter got out and opened an umbrella. The rain was hammering the ground now. As I stepped out of the car, I felt like I was crossing an invisible border. The front door opened slowly, and a gust of warm air carrying the scent of magnolia and jasmine wrapped around me. I didn't know it then, but that night I wasn't just entering a stranger's house. I was walking into the story that would change my life forever. I don't know how long I stood in silence after stepping out of that car. The air smelled of wet earth and flowers. The mansion in front of me looked like it was pulled from the Gilded Age. High windows, lace curtains, iron lanterns flickering in the storm. Yet what shook me most wasn't the size of the place, but its stillness, a calm so dense it felt like it was watching me. Walter offered me the umbrella. "Right this way, ma'am," he said, his voice kind but professional. Mrs. Sterling moved forward slowly with her cane, never hesitating, as if she had memorized every single tile. I followed her, soaked and confused, wondering what I was doing there, what this blind woman who had crashed into my darkest night actually wanted. Crossing the threshold, a soft warmth embraced me. The interior was a living museum, antique portraits, grandfather clocks, a crystal chandelier dripping with light. Faint music floated in the air, barely audible, as if someone had left an old record player running in another room. "Sit down, dear," Mrs. Sterling said, pointing to a blue velvet armchair. "Walter, prepare tea and light the fire." The man disappeared without a word. I obeyed. The armchair was soft, warm. My hands were shaking on my knees. She settled in front of me, and with an almost theatrical calm, she said, "Now you can tell me what happened." I didn't know where to start. "It was a fight," I murmured. "Not the first one, but definitely the last one." "And he left you there?" she asked, unsurprised. "Yes, at the bus stop." "With no money?" I nodded. She tilted her head, confirming something she already knew. "I imagined as much. It was obvious in the way he looked at you. Did you see it?" "Did I see it?" I asked, forgetting for a second that she was blind. She smiled, and her smile unsettled me. "I don't need eyes to see, Claire." "My name again," I shivered. "I don't understand how you know who I am." "Let's just say destiny warned me of your arrival," she replied, pouring tea with impossible precision for someone without sight. And I always listen to destiny. Walter returned with a tray. Porcelain cups, cookies shaped like hearts. The fire crackled in the fireplace. The sound was hypnotic. I can't stay long, I said, trying to regain some control. You just need to rest, she interrupted, and to remember who you are because you've forgotten, haven't you? I didn't know how to answer. I just stared at the fire. For years, I had forgotten many things. What I liked, what I dreamed of, who I was before I became Richard's shadow. This woman knew it. Or worse, she seemed to have lived it. After tea, Walter showed me to the guest room. The curtains were white linen, and on the nightstand, an antique clock read 10:10 p.m. The ticking filled the silence like a heart refusing to stop beating. Before I fell asleep, I heard slow steps in the hallway. It was her, Mrs. Sterling. Her silhouette stopped in front of my door. She didn't come in. She just said, "Do not fear the darkness, Claire. Sometimes it is the only place where one can find themselves again." I woke up at dawn. For the first time in ages, I had slept deeply. The sheets smelled of lavender. Through the window, the garden looked like a painting. Tall trees, blooming rose bushes, and a fountain in the center where sparrows were bathing without fear. When I went downstairs, I found her in the dining room, dressed in pearl gray, wearing a vintage pearl necklace. Next to her was a newspaper tied with a red ribbon. "Do you look better?" she asked without looking at me. The tea did its job. "Thank you, but I must go," I said. "I don't want to be a burden." She smiled serenely. "And where would you go, Claire?" "I don't know." "Then you can't leave yet. No one can run away without a direction." Walter appeared, set down breakfast, and left silently. Mrs. Sterling picked up her cup with elegance and asked, "How long have you been married?" 41 years. "And of those 41, how many were you happy?" I took a moment to answer. "Maybe the first 10? "So you have already lived more than half your life pretending you still were," she concluded. "That, my dear, is more deadly than loneliness." I stayed silent. Her words hurt, but I couldn't contradict them. After breakfast, she invited me to walk in the garden. The sun filtered through the branches, and the flowers released an intoxicating scent. Even though she couldn't see, she walked with a firm step, as if the trees and paths whispered to her. "You know," I said, unable to hold back, "you don't seem to need anyone." She laughed softly. "Of course I need people. We all need people. But I learned something. It is one thing to need company, and another thing entirely to need permission to exist." We stopped in front of the fountain. The water droplets fell like a metronome. "Men like your husband," she said in a low voice, "believe they own us, but they are only owners of their own fear." "Fear?" "Yes, fear of the woman who stops being afraid of them." Back in the house, I stopped in front of a large mirror framed in gold. It was covered by a heavy white cloth. "Why is it covered?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Because there are things that should only be looked at when one is ready." "Ready for what?" "To see the truth without shattering." Her answer froze me. I didn't insist, but as I walked up the stairs, I felt something strange, a mix of fear and curiosity. It was as if that mirror, hidden under its veil, was waiting for me. That night, as the rain returned with a vengeance, I heard a sound coming from the hallway. A whisper. My name. Claire. I got up, opened the door, and saw Mrs. Sterling's shadow walking toward the main parlor. She was carrying a lit candle. I followed her. She stopped in front of the covered mirror, caressed the fabric, and said quietly, "Not yet." Then she turned toward me, even though she couldn't see me, and murmured, "Tomorrow you will understand." I went back to my room with my heart racing. I didn't know if that woman was an angel, a lunatic, or simply someone who had seen too much. But something inside me, an old, almost ancestral intuition, told me that this blind old woman had appeared for a reason, and what I was about to discover in this house was going to change everything. I couldn't sleep that night. The rain battered the windows with an irregular rhythm, like someone knocking softly, waiting to be let in. In the hallway, the grandfather clock marked the hours with a deep echo, and even though I tried to ignore it, I couldn't stop thinking about the covered mirror in the parlor. That mirror seemed to have a life of its own. From my bed, I could see the light of the fireplace dancing under the door gap. I got up. The wooden floor creaked under my bare feet. I went down slowly, without turning on the lights, following the dim glow of the fire. The silence was so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. The parlor was the same as before, only darker. The white cloth still covered the mirror, but something about it moved slightly, as if it were breathing. I froze. Logic begged me to go back to my room, but something deeper, a mix of curiosity and premonition, pushed me closer. I touched the cloth. It was cold, almost damp. For an instant, I felt something vibrating behind it, as if there were a pulse hidden inside the glass. Then I heard my name. Low, almost imperceptible. Claire. I stepped back. There was no doubt. That voice was mine. My voice, but different. Younger, sweeter, more naive. I looked at the cloth again. My hands were shaking. Without thinking, I pulled it off. The mirror reflected the room, and something else. It wasn't my reflection I saw, but a blurry vintage image. A modest dining room, a table with withered flowers, and in the center, myself, 30 years younger, serving dinner to Richard. I could hear his voice, cutting, precise. Soup again? Do you never get tired of being useless? I covered my mouth. It was a memory the mirror was feeding back to me. Richard stood up. He threw the plate on the floor. I saw my younger self crouch down to pick up the pieces without responding, and I saw the tears escaping my eyes. It was like watching my own humiliation from the outside, but without the power to intervene. Then, behind me, Mrs. Sterling's voice broke the silence. I warned you not to uncover it. I spun around. She was there, standing without her cane, without fear, her hair loose like a silver shadow. What is this? I asked, gasping for air. It is the truth, she said calmly. The mirror doesn't show what we are, but what we forget to look at. I approached her, trembling. Why are you showing me this? Because you are still clinging to a past that broke you, Evelyn replied, and as long as you do, you will remain a prisoner. And you? I asked. Did you use it too? She smiled sadly. A long time ago, and what I saw took away my fear, but it also stole my sleep. Her tone chilled my blood. She walked to the mirror, reached out a hand, and touched it gently. Look at it again, she said. I obeyed. This time the reflection changed. It was no longer my house, but Evelyn's. She was much younger, crying in the same parlor, in front of a man who was insulting her. The man's face was blurred, but his voice sounded with the same contempt as Richard's. You are a burden, Evelyn. You don't even know how to love. She collapsed, alone, with her newly acquired blindness. And in that moment, I understood. It wasn't just a mirror. It was a witness, a portal between two lives that shared the same pain. Why are you showing me this? I murmured through tears. Because you and I are the same story told twice, Evelyn replied. You came to close a cycle I couldn't finish. Her words left me breathless. The mirror glowed brighter. Images of women began to appear on its surface. A young girl with a baby in her arms, another with a bruised eye, another looking at the floor while a man screamed. And among all of them, one figure caught my attention. It was a woman with her hair pinned up in a blue dress. She had my features, but it wasn't me. Who is that? I asked. Your mother, Evelyn said with a sigh. And mine, too. I turned to her, confused. What are you saying? That blood and destiny have memory, she said softly. And sometimes pain is inherited just like eyes or a voice. I backed away from the mirror, terrified. The reflection went back to just being my face, but my expression was no longer the same. There was something new in me, a mix of strength and fear, clarity and vertigo. The old woman approached and took my hand. You saw what you needed to see. Now begins the hardest part, learning not to repeat it. The fire sparked in the chimney. Walter appeared in the doorway, surprised to see us there at that hour. Everything all right, Mrs. Sterling? She nodded. Yes, Walter. Everything is where it should be. But when he looked at me, or rather, when he turned his face toward where I was standing, his demeanor changed. Claire, she said softly, this house didn't find you by accident. The mirror brought you, and the mirror brought you to me. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of generations pressing on my chest. It wasn't just Richard. It wasn't just my mother's sad eyes or Evelyn's blindness. It was a chain. A long, heavy iron chain of women taught to be quiet, to be small, to apologize for taking up space. And I realized with a terrifying clarity that I was the link that had to snap. That night, I didn't sleep. The echo of the images remained in my mind like a melody that wouldn't fade. I thought about my mother, her perpetual silence, how she lowered her head in front of my father, just like I did with Richard. And I understood with a new and deep pain that humiliation wasn't an accident, it was an inheritance. But I also knew something else. That inheritance could be broken. And if Mrs. Sterling was telling the truth, destiny had given me a chance. The chance to put an end, once and for all, to the suffering the women of my family had been dragging for generations. I looked out the window. The dawn was peeking behind the trees. The mirror was covered again, and although my hands were trembling, I smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a victim, but a witness to my own awakening. The dawn brought a new silence, not the silence of fear, but the kind that settles in the soul when it can no longer keep running. I went down to the dining room, eyes puffy from a sleepless night. Mrs. Sterling was there, sitting by the window drinking coffee. She didn't need to see me to know I had been crying. What did you see last night? She asked without turning. Everything, I replied. She nodded slowly. Then, you are no longer the same. I sat across from her. There weren't enough words to describe what I had felt in front of that mirror. Fear, shame, and a strange sensation of relief. It was as if I had finally been able to look at my life without lies, without justifications, without excuses. For a moment, I thought Mrs. Sterling would comfort me, but she didn't. Her voice was firm, almost tough. Seeing the past is useless if you don't do something with it. I don't know what to do, I said. Of course you know, she retorted. You're just afraid to admit it. Admit what? She set down her cup and interlaced her hands on the table. That you deserve more, that your life still belongs to you. Her words pierced me. At 68, I couldn't remember the last time someone had told me something like that. Richard had made it his job to convince me that my value depended on his approval, but this blind woman spoke as if she had known me forever. After breakfast, we went out to the garden. The sun filtered through the trees and the air smelled of magnolia. She walked slowly, leaning on her cane, and yet she seemed to be guiding me. I had a Richard too, she said suddenly. I stopped. What? Yes. A man who confused my love with his property. His name was Ernest Rivers. He was my husband, my tormentor, and the reason I decided not to die a victim. She sat on a stone bench. Her hands, thin and pale, rested on the cane. Her voice changed. It became lower. When he blinded me, I thought my life was over. He blinded you? I asked, horrified. An accident, she said bitterly. Oh, that's what they told me. But a woman knows when something wasn't an accident. She fell silent for a few seconds. I wasn't breathing. Her story was a piece of mine, only more brutal, more definitive. And what did you do? I asked. I survived, she replied with a slight smile. I got up. I learned to walk without seeing, to listen to people's steps, to distinguish their lies by the tone of their voice. And one day, when no one expected anything from me anymore, I built all of this. She swept a hand toward the house, with my own hands, with the money he thought I could never manage alone. I looked at her with awe. This woman, blind and alone, had created an entire life from her ruin, and in that instant, I understood why she had picked me up at that bus stop. She saw in me the woman she was before she was reborn. It wasn't a coincidence that we met, Evelyn said, as if reading my thoughts. Destiny doesn't cross paths on a whim. Is that why you knew my name? I asked. She nodded. Yes, and because I had seen you before. How? I whispered. Years ago, before I lost my sight, I was friends with your mother. I froze. My mother? Yes. She used to come to this house when you were a little girl. I remember her as a sweet woman, but sad. Your father was extinguishing her, little by little. She never wanted to talk about it, but her eyes said everything. I put a hand to my chest. A tear rolled down without permission. I remembered the days when my mother, with a trembling voice, would tell me, "Daughter, don't argue with your father. He's just having a bad day." That bad day lasted his whole life, and without meaning to, I had repeated the history. Mrs. Sterling continued, "When your mother died, I knew you were alive, married, far away, but I didn't want to look for you until a few weeks ago I dreamed of her." Of my mother? Yes, she asked me to find you. She said you were in danger, that you had to remember who you were before it was too late. Her voice trembled for the first time, and for a second the strong, imposing woman I knew turned into a fragile human elder. That's why I went to that bus stop, she continued, because I knew destiny would take you there. I couldn't speak. Emotion closed my throat. It was too much. My mother, the dreams, the mirror, that impossible coincidence. Everything made sense, and at the same time it seemed like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. We spent the rest of the day in the garden. She taught me to listen to the wind, to recognize sounds, the rustle of leaves, the song of a bird, the murmur of water. When you can't see, you learn to hear the soul of things, she told me, and then she added with a sad smile, and when they break your heart, you learn to hear the soul of people. Her words moved me deeply. I asked her if she had ever forgiven her husband. She laughed softly. Forgiveness is a big word. Let's just say I no longer belong to him, not even with hate. Is he still alive? No, she replied. But even if he were, it wouldn't matter to me anymore. She stood up with effort. Now you must decide if you will continue being a victim of a man or if you will learn to be your own salvation. That night, as I prepared to sleep, I found a folded note on my bed. The handwriting was Evelyn's. When the time comes, open the box in the desk. Inside, you will find something that belongs to both of us. But not before. First, you must remember what it feels like to be free. I lay down hugging that note. I didn't know exactly what it meant, but I felt that box held the heart of everything. And for the first time in years, instead of fear, I felt curiosity for the future. I looked toward the window, where the reflection of the distant mirror shone barely under the moonlight. And I knew that, although the road was just beginning, I was no longer the same woman Richard had left at that bus stop. There are wounds that don't close with time, but with understanding. And that was what Mrs. Sterling taught me during the weeks that followed. To understand pain, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. I would wake up early, long before the sun came up, and find her already up, sitting by the window, listening to the first sounds of the day. You don't need to see the sunrise to feel it, she would say. Every day starts the same, but how you live it depends on what you decide to leave behind. The first few days were hard. I was used to obeying, not choosing, to staying quiet, not saying what I felt, to serving, not doing. And yet Evelyn, with her firm voice and infinite patience, was teaching me to unlearn. One afternoon, while we were having tea in the garden, she asked me something that froze me. "Write a letter to Richard," she said. "A letter?" "Yes, but not to send it. Write it to let go of everything you never said." I spent hours in front of a blank page. The words wouldn't come out. Until I remembered his shouting voice, his disdain, his silences. And then, the pen started moving by itself. "Richard, you made me small because you knew that if I ever lifted my head, you would stop being big. You silenced me, and you succeeded for years. But silence gets tiring too. And today, from this silence that no longer hurts, I forgive you. Not for you, But for me, because I don't want your shadow to keep living inside me. When I finished, I felt something strange. Lightness, as if writing had returned the air he had stolen from me for years. That night, Mrs. Sterling handed me a small wooden box. "Don't open it yet," she said. "What's inside?" "An answer." "But not for today." I didn't insist. I learned that in this house, answers arrived when one was ready, not when one asked for them. Over the days, she began to teach me things that seemed simple, but hid deep lessons. Walking with eyes closed, she said, isn't so different from living dependent on others. How can I do it? Listen, she responded. The soul knows more about paths than the eyes. And so, with a blindfold over my eyes, I learned to guide myself by sounds, by intuition, by trust. It was terrifying and liberating. Every step was a victory, a reminder that I could still move forward without anyone pushing me or stopping me. One afternoon, walking like that, I tripped and fell. The impact was hard. Doña Emilia approached, unhurried. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Yes." "Good. Pain doesn't always come to punish you, Claire. Sometimes it comes to remind you that you're still alive." Her words made me cry, not from sadness, but from comprehension. For the first time, I understood that the suffering I had carried for so many years wasn't just a scar. It was also proof of my resilience. But before we continue, I want you to do something for me. Tell me in the comments what you think of this story so far and what you would do in my place. Don't click away, because what comes next will give you goosebumps. Now, let's go on. One gray afternoon, when the rain was falling softly on the large windows, Mrs. Sterling sat with me in front of the fireplace. Her face looked more tired than usual. "Claire, I have to talk to you about something," she said softly. "I don't have much time left." I felt a knot in my throat. "Don't say that." "Don't be afraid," she interrupted me. "We all have a time to depart, and mine is approaching. But before I go, I want to make sure you learn the most important thing. Freedom is not begged for. It is taken." She leaned toward me and took my hands. "I want you to promise something, whatever happens, that when that man returns, because he will return, I assure you, you do not receive him from a place of resentment, but from your new strength. And if he asks for forgiveness, do not reject the forgiveness, but do not confuse it with reconciliation. Forgiveness heals, but dignity is not negotiable." I cried, not because I was afraid, but because I understood I was facing a goodbye. Mrs. Sterling didn't speak like someone who feared dying, but like someone who had already made peace with life. That night, saying goodnight, she caressed my face. "You are stronger than you believe, Claire. The only thing missing is for you to look at yourself without pity." "I don't know if I can." "Yes, you can. Because the mirror doesn't only show wounds, it also reflects the woman who is born from them." She retreated slowly, and before going up the stairs, she stopped. "When you feel everything getting dark," she said without turning back, "don't run. Darkness is sometimes just the prelude to light." That night, I dreamed of my mother. She was in the garden, under the rain, wearing the same blue dress from the mirror. She was smiling at me, and behind her, in the mist, I saw the figure of a young Evelyn, with her eyes open, looking at me. Both extended a hand to me, and I heard a voice, I don't know if it was mine or theirs, whisper, "You are ready." I woke up with tears in my eyes, but without sadness, because for the first time in a long time, I felt something inside me waking up. Sometimes life doesn't warn you when it's going to put you in front of your ghosts. It simply leaves them at your door, as if saying, "Here it is. Now let's see if you really changed." It was a cold morning when I saw him again. Almost 3 months had passed since Mrs. Sterling took me in. I was no longer the same woman Richard had abandoned at a bus stop. I had my hair pulled back with dignity, a new look in the mirror, and a peace that didn't depend on anyone. Walter was sweeping the entrance when I heard his voice. "Mrs. Clare, there is someone asking for you." "Who?" I asked, completely unsuspecting. "He says he is your husband." The world seemed to stop. My breathing became heavy, my heart pounded, but my voice came out serene. "Tell him to come in." Richard entered the garden wearing the same expensive clothes as always, but without the same air. His haughty posture had collapsed. The face that used to radiate arrogance now looked tired, aged. He had lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes. His beard was unkempt. For a moment, it was hard to recognize the man I once thought I loved. "Claire," he said, his voice barely a tremor. "I had to see you." I didn't answer. I just watched him. That silence, the one that had been imposed on me so many times, was now mine, and for the first time I used it as a weapon. "I need to talk to you," he continued. "I know I don't deserve your time, but everything fell apart." "What fell apart?" I asked calmly. "The company, the bank accounts." He paused, looking down. "The woman I was with, she left me." I felt a pang of irony, but I didn't speak. He lifted his head and looked directly at me. "You don't know what I went through. I lost everything, Claire. Everything." "No," I replied slowly. "What you lost was what you never valued. Because what is real is not lost. It is cared for." His expression changed. For a moment, he looked like he was about to cry. "I just wanted to ask for your forgiveness." I didn't know what to say. For years, I had imagined this moment. I dreamed of screaming at him, claiming my due, humiliating him like he humiliated me. But now that he was there, defeated, I understood that I didn't need to do it anymore. Revenge had stopped making sense. Forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. "You don't have to ask me for forgiveness," I said finally. He looked at me confused. "No?" "No, because you don't owe me anything anymore. What you did to me hurt, yes, but it also taught me to find myself." Mrs. Sterling appeared in the doorway of the parlor, leaning on her cane. Her presence filled the air with a silent authority. Richard turned toward her with automatic respect, as if sensing that this woman knew more than she showed. "You must be the lady of the house," Richard said, trying to regain his composure. "I am the one who showed your wife that she doesn't need permission to breathe," Evelyn replied with a serene smile. He furrowed his brow, uncomfortable. "I didn't mean to hurt her." "Of course you did," she retorted without raising her voice. "But don't worry. The punishment for men who wound doesn't always come from the outside. The day comes when they look in the mirror and don't recognize themselves." Richard fell silent. I watched him, and for the first time, I felt compassion. Not love, not hate, just compassion. The pity one feels for someone who, without realizing it, destroyed himself. "Claire," he said then with a thread of a voice, "I have nowhere to stay. I just need a few days." Evelyn looked at me. Her face was serene, but her words were a warning. "You decide, Claire. The test isn't how you faced him, but what you do now that he's back." Internal monologue. I looked him in the eyes, really looked at him, and I saw it. The same flash of entitlement hidden behind the mask of regret. He hadn't changed. He was just scared. If I let him in, even for a night, I would be stepping back into the cage. And the door was finally open. "I can't offer you what you're looking for," I told him. "Not even a roof?" he whispered. "You already have the sky," I replied calmly. "If you really want to start over, start by looking up at it." He lowered his head. For a second, I thought he would kneel, but he didn't. He just murmured an "I'm sorry," and walked away. His shadow faded as he crossed the gate. When he was gone, my legs shook. But it wasn't fear. It was relief. Mrs. Sterling approached and took my hand. "I am proud of you," she whispered. "It wasn't easy," I told her. "Nothing worth having ever is." I sat next to her. Her breathing was slower than usual. The skin on her hands was cold. "Evelyn, are you okay?" "I'm tired, dear," she said, smiling. "But don't worry." "Don't tell me that." "Shh," she interrupted me sweetly. "Do not fear. Death does not scare one when one has already fulfilled their purpose." She leaned toward me. Promise me you will open the box. I will. And that you will live as the woman you are now. Never lower your head again, not even for love. Her fingers squeezed mine with surprising strength. Then she took a deep breath and whispered, I can see again, but not with eyes. She died that same night, in silence, sitting in her favorite armchair, with a slight smile on her lips, like someone finally resting. Walter found her at dawn, with a box on her lap and my name written on a card. For Claire, it is not the end. It is the beginning. I knelt beside her and cried like I hadn't in years. Not from sadness, but from gratitude, because she had returned to me the most valuable thing a woman can recover, her own voice. I looked toward the mirror in the parlor. For an instant, I thought I saw two silhouettes reflected, mine and Mrs. Sterling's, smiling behind me, and I knew she hadn't left entirely. She had just changed form. The sunrise after Mrs. Sterling's death was unlike any other. The air inside the house felt heavy, as if the walls also understood the absence. There was no crying, no voices, no steps, only the ticking of the clock in the parlor, marking the life that went on, stubborn, even if the soul resisted accepting it. I sat in front of the cold fireplace. The box with my name rested on my knees. It was dark, polished wood, with a faint scent of cedar and jasmine, like everything that belonged to her. Next to it, the card written in her shaky handwriting. For Claire, it is not the end. It is the beginning. I held it between my fingers for long minutes before opening it. I was afraid of what it might contain, afraid of feeling that her departure was final if I discovered her last secret. But I was more afraid of remaining the same if I didn't. I took a deep breath and lifted the lid. Inside was a sealed folder, a yellow envelope, and a small golden key. Nothing else. The envelope had writing on it. Read this first. I opened it. Her voice, alive among the words, accompanied me as my eyes scanned every line. Dearest Claire, if you are reading this, it is because I have left this house. Do not weep for me. My departure is not sadness. It is fulfillment. You promised me you would open the box when you were ready, and that means you have already learned the most important thing, the value of your own gaze. In the folder, you will find my will. The house, the accounts, the properties, everything is in your name. Do not be surprised. I do not do it out of pity. I do it because it belongs to you. But there is something else you must know, something I kept for years and that only you can understand. The key opens the chest in the basement, behind the mirror. There lie the pieces of the past that unite us. If you decide to open it, prepare yourself to look at the truth without fear. Do not forget, Claire. The greatest inheritance is not money, but the freedom to choose. With love, Evelyn. My hands trembled. I read the letter twice, 3 times. I didn't know whether to feel relief or vertigo. The mirror again. Walter entered at that moment. His eyes red, betrayed a night of held-back tears. I am so sorry, ma'am, he said with a broken voice. She asked me not to notify anyone else. She wanted everything to be peaceful. I nodded. I know. That was her way. Firm until the end. On the table, he placed a white envelope. The estate attorney will come tomorrow, but she asked me to give you this today. What is it? A letter. From Mrs. Sterling. Also for you. The envelope was closed with a wax seal. I opened it. Inside was a brief note, written in the same elegant calligraphy. Walter knows more than he appears to. Trust him. Not everything you see here was mine. Part of this story belongs to him, too. I looked at him, confused. He lowered his eyes, nervous. The madam, he said in a low voice, made me promise I wouldn't speak until you read that letter. Since you have read it, I must tell you the truth. We went down to the basement together. It was a place I had never seen before. Spacious, with shelves full of boxes, paintings covered by sheets, antique furniture. In a corner, behind the mirror that had been moved there the night before, was a small chest. I used the golden key. The click of the lock sounded like a heartbeat. Inside were documents, black and white photographs, and a leather-bound notebook. I opened it. On the first page, a date, 1954, and a phrase written in blue ink. For my sister Anne, if you ever read this, forgive me for not returning. Anne, my mother. I felt the floor move under my feet. Evelyn was my mother's sister? I asked. Walter nodded. Yes. Why did I never know? Because her family erased her. He paused. Her father did not approve of the man she married. She was disinherited. She left without looking back. I leaned on the chest to keep from falling. My mother never spoke to me of a sister. Never. And yet, there she was. Her handwriting, her words, her hidden story among the dust of time. I turned the pages. It was a diary. It recounted her youth, her love for Ernest, the violence, the accident that left her blind, the reconstruction of her life. But there was something else. In several entries, she spoke of my mother, of me, of secret visits. Today I went to see her. My little Claire is already walking. I cannot stay. Anne cannot risk her husband discovering that I come. But every time I hug her, I feel that destiny unites us again. If one day she reads this, she will know that I never abandoned her. Tears blurred my vision. I pressed the diary to my chest. My God, I whispered. All my life I thought I was alone, and she looked for me. Internal monologue. I sat on the cold basement floor, clutching that diary like a lifeline. It rewrote my entire history. I wasn't just the daughter of a sad woman who withered away. I was the niece of a survivor. The blood in my veins wasn't just made for enduring pain, it was made for rebuilding. I wasn't a random charity case Evelyn picked up. I was family. I was home. Walter put a hand on my shoulder. The madam knew she should tell you in person, but she feared time wouldn't be enough. And you? I served her for more than 40 years. I was a witness to her sadness and her hope. She believed that every woman was born with a mission. Hers was to leave you prepared to continue hers. That night, I didn't sleep. I read every page of the diary, one after another, as if Evelyn's soul were speaking to me from the paper. It told how, after the accident, she began to welcome battered women, abandoned women, lost women like herself. She gave them shelter, work, and a new chance. She called that place the Sunrise Haven. For years it operated in secret until a betrayal forced her to close it. I swore that when I died, someone would reopen it. Maybe my sister, maybe her daughter. I closed the diary with trembling hands. There was no doubt anymore. That inheritance wasn't an act of generosity. It was a calling. The next morning, the estate attorney arrived punctually. A man in a gray suit, kind face, and a slow voice that seemed experienced in news that shakes the soul. We sat in the study. The document on the table had several pages signed and sealed. Mrs. Sterling left everything in your name, Miss Clare, said the attorney. Everything? Yes. The house, the accounts, the property title, and a trust destined for the creation of a foundation. A foundation? That is correct. In the will, she specifies it clearly. He opened a folder and read, I desire that my niece, Claire Galvez, create a shelter for homeless women, single mothers, or victims of abuse. That will be my legacy. I want it to be called like my first house, the Sunrise Haven. I couldn't hold back the tears. Every word was a confirmation that destiny hadn't made a mistake. Everything I had lived, the humiliation, the abandonment, the loneliness, had prepared me for this. Walter approached and offered me a handkerchief. She knew you would accept, he said. And if I don't? I asked between sobs. Then the money will be transferred to an anonymous charity, but, he paused, you won't do that. You already know what your mission is. Underscore, 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 underscore. Part 3. The ending. Days passed, and the house began to change. I opened the windows. I let the light in. The echo of Evelyn's laughter seemed to float in the hallways. In the garden, the flowers she tended with such care bloomed again. Walter helped me organize the papers, the donations, the permits. Little by little, the Sunrise Haven began to be reborn. The first to arrive were 3 women: a young girl with a baby, a lady escaping a violent husband, and a teenager with no family sleeping on the street. When they crossed the door, I felt something that cannot be explained, as if Evelyn were there, watching, smiling. Every night, turning off the lights, I sat in front of the mirror. I didn't fear it anymore. I looked at it with respect, with gratitude. And every time I did, I seemed to see something different. Not just my reflection, but also flashes of the past. Fragments of all the women who were once wounded, and who now found comfort within these walls. A month later, while reviewing the trust documents, I found a letter I hadn't seen before. It was hidden among the notary pages. I opened it. It was from Evelyn, written shortly before she died. Dear Claire, if you are reading this, it is because you already took the step. I am happy to know that the mirror didn't scare you, that pain didn't break you. Sometimes, the women of our family are born with the curse of silence. Your mother broke it halfway. I broke it with screams. You, however, broke it with dignity. Thank you for not letting my story die with me. If you ever doubt, look at yourself in the mirror again. But this time you won't see the past. You will see the strength of all those who came before. I leave you my house, my name, and my faith. Do something with them that is worth the trouble. With eternal love, Evelyn. I cried in silence, not from sadness, but from gratitude, because I understood that I had inherited more than assets. I had inherited a mission of love and justice. That night, when the last light of the day went out, I went to the parlor. I lit a candle in front of the mirror and looked at myself head on. The reflection returned an image that shook me. Me, with my hair loose, eyes serene, face at peace. And behind, the diffuse silhouette of a woman with a cane. She was smiling. Thank you, Auntie, I whispered. And as if the wind answered me, the candle flame flickered softly. In that instant, I understood something I had never comprehended before. That love doesn't die with the body, that blood doesn't fade with the years, and that there are ties that time doesn't cut, it only transforms. I'm Claire Galvez, and this was my story. If it moved you, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support keeps the voices of these women alive. Remember, if anyone ever made you feel small, look in the mirror. You are still alive, and as long as you breathe, you have the right to start over.